Welcome to Brain Chatter, where we listen past the daily noise and explore topics at the intersection of leadership, workplace culture, profit, and sustainability. This episode is a little different from past episodes because in place of a living guest, I'll be reading a chapter of a book. The book is The Leader's Code, and the chapter is The Speed of Trust. I'll be reading by permission of the author, Dr. Ken Chapman, founder of Ken Chapman and Associates Incorporated. Chapter 4, The Speed of Trust. Muhammad Ali is a former world heavyweight boxing champion. He is also famous for more than a few quotable quotes. For example, this is how he explained his success. You have to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. Ali was talking about agility and flexibility, the ability to dodge, bob, and weave to prevent your competitor from laying a glove on you. And what is true of a skilled prizefighter is true of a successful organization. The ability to bob and weave and to be flexible in an ever-changing world is essential. But how does an organization do this? The boxing example ends here. The capacity to successfully manage change is a direct result of the speed of trust. Most of us are familiar with the role that trust plays in all kinds of relationships. We know the comfort and the confidence it gives us in every area of our lives. We also know how the loss of trust changes everything. We know trust requires time and effort to build, and we know that even with our best efforts, trust is fragile. We can lose in a moment what was built over a lifetime. So let's begin with a timeless definition of trust. Do the right thing. Deliver what is promised. Be reliable in your emotions, behavior, and judgment. The speed of trust describes how businesses apply these timeless truths. There are at least two parts to the speed of trust. The first part is trust as it has been understood in all times and all places. It forms the foundation of human society. What is not always recognized about trust is that it is the currency of business and of life. Money just happens to be how we measure trust in a business transaction. Consider the following. I live in a southern college town. I receive my electric service from a public utility. The electric company does something remarkable if you stop to think about it. Each month, they trust me and all their other customers. The electric company allows its customers to use all the electricity they want without paying for it in advance. At the end of each 30-day cycle, they send their customers a bill for kilowatts used. They trust their customers will pay, but this trust is dependent upon trust. Every customer who pays earns another 30 days of trust. Not only does the company trust its customers, but it continues to trust its customers even though a small percentage do not pay, and an even smaller percentage steal electricity. In fact, the electric company has an entire department dedicated to collecting bad debts and another department that deals with theft. Even so, the company designed its business practice around customers who can be trusted. It is simply too costly to do it otherwise. This is also true of those who provide water, natural gas, auto loans, but it doesn't end there. Virtually anything and everything can be purchased on credit. Credit means nothing more than someone decided to trust someone. And yes, a credit score is nothing more than a way of calculating how much trust has been earned. The second part of the speed of trust is the competitive advantage that it provides. The dodge, bob, and weave. This is the flexibility that enables a company to respond quickly to change. The definition of the second part of the speed of trust is as follows. The ease and efficiency with which challenges are met when team members assume full responsibility for earning and keeping the trust of their teammates. When people trust each other, everything costs less, takes less time, and morale is higher for everyone involved. When two people who do not trust each other try to solve a problem, they have to do something else first. First, they have to do the dance. The dance describes what people do when they do not trust each other. They dance around each other, trying to figure out how much of what the other person said they can believe. They shuffle, they bob, and they weave until they each believe they have found enough of the truth to continue. In the meantime, valuable time is lost. Then and only then can they turn their attention to the problem. The effort to find out how much of the other person's words are believable can take a few minutes, a few hours, a few days, or it may never happen. The absence of trust is costly. Not just because time is money, but because heroic behavior will rarely show its face when people do not trust each other. When people do not trust each other, they do not get involved. They comply. They keep their heads down. They do what they have to do. It takes all of their energy to make their way around the potholes, the gotchas of the culture. People focus on surviving, not on thriving. The company lacks the competitive advantage the speed of trust provides. In contrast, when two people who trust each other come together to solve a problem, they do not make a trip to the dance floor. They go straight to the issue at hand. The speed and ease with which they solve the problem makes a big difference. The problem is solved quickly, with fewer resources, and with far less wear on people. How do you establish the speed of trust in your organization? The answer is simple. Each team member makes it their business to earn the trust of others. Here are 6 things that you can do starting now to build the speed of trust. Take full responsibility for yourself. Be candid and clear. Care and connect. Commit to continuous improvement. Be positive. Demonstrate humility. Let's go into each of these individually. Take full responsibility for yourself. People trust accountability. This means I assume full responsibility for being trusted. My first responsibility is to manage my own words and behavior. It only works if I am fully responsible for me. No complaints, no hedging, no excuses. Sometimes the facts make me look good, sometimes they don't. It is what it is. Almost 100 years ago, a young man graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Following a brief posting stateside, he was assigned to the Panama Canal Zone. At the time, the Canal Zone was governed by a U.S. military governor, General William Fox Connor. The young officer served under General Connor and received his first mission shortly after his arrival. General Connor ordered him to lead a team of soldiers into the jungle to capture or kill the bandits who were robbing the payroll train. Each Saturday, the payroll train would travel across the zone delivering pay to the zone's employees. Bandits disrupted payroll delivery, which disrupted the smooth operation of the canal. The young officer eagerly led his men into the jungle. Though he had never led men in battle nor fought in the jungle, he was confident that he knew what there was to know. After 2 short weeks, the officer led his men out of the jungle. His mission failed. No bandits were captured, 2 of his men were wounded, and he himself had a minor injury. He knew General Connor sent young officers back to the States for less. More importantly, he was anxious to prove himself. After he delivered his wounded soldiers to the post infirmary, he went straight to Connor's office and asked to see the general. Connor was waiting for him, having already heard about the fiasco. The officer was shown into Connor's office. He began by assuring the general the men who entered the jungle with him did all they could reasonably be expected of them. The mission failure, the officer confessed, was mine and mine alone. He went on to outline what he had learned from his mistakes. He described how the lessons he learned would make him a better and more wise officer. General Connor came around his desk, sat on the corner, and said, "You're right. I was thinking about sending you back to the States. The jungle is no place for an arrogant officer. But I see something in you bigger than this mistake. I'm going to give you another chance." A few days later, the still young but wiser officer led his men into the jungle a second time. Within a week, he returned to the post having killed or captured the bandits. His unit suffered no casualties. The mission was a success. What did Connor see in this young officer? What convinced him he was worthy of a second chance? Connor gave him a second chance because the officer took full responsibility for himself. No complaints, no hedging, no excuses. It was what it was. Time would prove Connor right. A little more than 30 years later, the young officer, now much older, was named Supreme Commander of Allied Forces in Europe. Who was he? Dwight David Eisenhower, the future president and architect of the largest battle in human history. That battle, D-Day, the invasion of Normandy, defines the world we live in today. Eisenhower was trusted and respected by those who served with him. When he announced he would run for president in 1951, his former comrades in arms shut down the Western Union telegraph system. Western Union simply could not process 51,000 telegraphs per minute. Eisenhower won the presidency with the largest volunteer army, as a percent of the population, in U.S. history. People trust the leader who accepts full responsibility for himself. No complaints, no hedging, no excuses. Next, be candid and clear. People trust candor and clarity. They may not always like it, but they trust it. What does candor and clarity look like? It is the ability to objectively describe what one observes or wants. It does not overstate the facts. It does not hedge or hide. It does not have an agenda. Candor and clarity show courage. It is the courage to say what needs to be said, when it needs to be said, and to have enough compassion to say it in a way that does not create a whole new issue. Candor and clarity do not beat people up with the truth. It sets people up to succeed by being candid, clear, and compassionate. The American civil rights leader, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, was a shining example of candor and clarity. Dr. King gave voice to the unfinished work of social equality in America. The 100 years between the end of the Civil War in 1865 and the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s was a difficult time for ethnic minorities. African Americans were at the center of those difficult years. Dr. King brought candor, clarity, and compassion to the resolution of old wrongs. But it was not easy, and in the end, it cost him his life. Dr. King was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's success with nonviolent protest. In 1959, a religious organization associated with the Quakers helped King visit Gandhi's birthplace in India. In the aftermath of this trip, Dr. King concluded nonviolent civil disobedience was the most moral course in opposing segregation. Dr. King's nonviolent approach was tested with the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, on September 15, 1963. On that fateful Sunday, Klansmen planted 16 sticks of dynamite outside the church. At 10:20 a.m., an explosion ripped through the building. 4 young girls, Addie Mae Collins, Carol Robinson, Cynthia Wesley, and Denise McNair, were killed, and 22 others were injured. While some called for revenge, Dr. King called for calm. Fortunately, Dr. King's candor, clarity, and compassion won the day. He said what needed to be said, when it needed to be said, and in a manner that made things better, not worse. He candidly described the bombing as cowardly and wrong, and he was clear about his commitment to find a peaceful way forward. And his compassion brought the broken hearts of Black and white America together. The Reverend Dr. King set America up to succeed with candid, clear, and compassionate communication. People trust the candid, clear, and compassionate leader. Care and connect. People trust those who make the effort to care and connect. People do not care what you know until they know that you care. We do not and often cannot trust what we do not know. The people around us need to know who we are, where we're from, and what is important to us. And we must listen long enough and well enough to learn the same about them. This is how human connections are made. The more connected people feel, the more they care, and the better they behave. The less connected people feel, the less they care, and the more poorly they behave. Try this simple strategy. Listen carefully and thoughtfully to others. Take note of where your thoughts, feelings, and experiences match with others. Make connections. Share connections. It may be as simple as learning of a new common interest in a sports team, or it may be as major as a shared experience in a life-changing event. Caring enough to connect builds the speed of trust. People trust when they have reason to believe you care for something more than yourself. They trust those who care about the best interests of the common good, not just their own good. Most of us welcome the kind of story that unfolded on the playing field of the Detroit Tigers in June of 2010. Detroit pitcher Armando Galarraga was 1 out away from pitching a perfect game. No hits, no runs, no errors. One of baseball's most difficult feats. A Cleveland Indians player hit a grounder to the Detroit first baseman, who made a quick throw to Galarraga, who rushed over to cover the bag. As he caught the ball, Galarraga broke into a big smile. He believed he had just pitched a perfect game, a pitcher's dream. But umpire Jim Joyce had another opinion. Joyce called the runner safe. Galarraga was stunned, but walked back to the mound. He retired the next batter. Meanwhile, all the television replays showed the batter on first had clearly been out. After the game, umpire Joyce reviewed the video and knew he had made the wrong call. A veteran and highly respected ump, Joyce admitted his error, saying, "I cost the kid a perfect game." For the next 24 hours, the blown call was replayed on all the cable channels and network news programs. It went viral on the internet, and it was discussed endlessly on talk radio. More than a few fans had harsh, even threatening things to say about what should happen to the umpire. It was clear that even one word of resentment from Armando Galarraga would have ignited a firestorm. The following night at Tiger Stadium, Detroit manager Jim Leyland made a great call of his own. He asked Galarraga to present the night's lineup card to Joyce at the beginning of the game. With the whole stadium watching, Galarraga walked up to Joyce, put his arm around him, and smiled as he handed over the card. Galarraga told Joyce, "We've all made our share of honest mistakes. Let's move on." Joyce teared up as the Detroit fans gave both men a standing ovation. People trust when they have reason to believe you care for something more than yourself. They trust those who care about the best interest of the common good, not just their own good. Commit to continuous improvement. People trust competence. A focus on equipment and processes alone will not build trust. If people do not trust the person, they will find it hard to trust the equipment or the process. Trust comes from the confidence that a person knows what he knows and that a person knows what he does not know. We trust those who are competent. We trust those who are confident enough to own what they do not know. But owning is not enough. we trust confidence when it shows an effort toward continued competence. It is possible to be competent in 1990 and incompetent with the same skills 30 years later. Any number of tasks in any number of jobs could be done and done well without a computer in 1990. No one would make the same claim in today's workforce. My favorite definition of a professional is a person who is committed to becoming increasingly good at what they already do well. Captain Chesley Sullenberger, the pilot who landed the U.S. Airways jet on the Hudson River in 2009, is a trusted, competent pilot. The plane he successfully landed under extraordinary circumstances was an Airbus A320. The Airbus A320 is a complex flying machine and is a far cry from the plane in which Sullenberger first learned to fly. Captain Sullenberger enrolled in the United States Air Force Academy in 1969 and was one of only a dozen cadets chosen for the glider flight program. His record at the Air Force Academy indicates that Cadet Sullenberger developed into an exceptional glider pilot. Even so, the technological gap between a glider and an Airbus A320 is a large gap. Fortunately, for everyone on U.S. Airways Flight 1549, Sullenberger did not stop learning when he was a cadet. Over time, he became a first-rate airline pilot. The Miracle on the Hudson would have had a very different ending if Sullenberger had not been committed to becoming increasingly good at what he already did well. People trust competence. Be positive. People trust clear-eyed optimism. Optimism inspires trust. People want to believe things will work out. No matter how gloomy the present circumstances, people are drawn to hope. They know a can-do attitude makes a big difference. There have been too many moments in their own lives when all they had was courage, determination, and grit. Team members respect courage, determination, and grit. They appreciate a leader who is a clear-eyed optimist. This is the leader who does not see things better than they are or worse than they are. They see things as they are and find a good path forward. It is difficult, if not impossible, to trust a negative attitude. This comes from our common sense. On one level or another, we all know a negative attitude is the oldest dodge in the world. It is an effort to avoid responsibility. If people position themselves as victims, then by definition, they are neither responsible for their circumstances nor accountable for improving those circumstances. I once heard a foundry supervisor describe these people as pocket chalk people. I asked what he meant by pocket chalk people, and he replied, the chalk police use to outline the victim at a crime scene. Pocket chalk people are ready in a flash to make themselves the victim. They're never responsible for anything they do. Leaders do not see themselves as victim of circumstance. Leaders assume responsibility for creating a better tomorrow. A positive attitude builds the speed of trust. The Blitz, as it would become known, was the sustained bombing of British civilians by Adolf Hitler's Air Force. While many British cities were bombed, London, the seat of the British government, took the brunt of the bombings. Nazi Germany carpet-bombed London for 57 consecutive nights during April and May of 1941. 43,000 civilians were killed and over 1 million homes were destroyed in and around London. Hitler's goal was to demoralize the English population. He wanted the British government to surrender without the need for an invasion. By 1941, Great Britain was one of the only parts of Europe that was not under Hitler's control. Most of the rest of Europe had already fallen to Hitler's army. The United States would not enter the war until December of 1941. Two New York Times headlines from May of 1941 best describe where the people of Great Britain found themselves. England stands alone. Save for England, the lights have gone out all over Europe. Hitler's brutal effort to demoralize the British people had the opposite effect. The violent bombing stiffened the resolve of the British, and the British Queen played an important part in Hitler's failure. During the Blitz, the British Queen and her husband, King George VI, refused to leave London for the safety of the countryside. They feared it would play into Hitler's plan and demoralize the population. To prove that she had not left the city, the British Queen walked the streets of London every morning following a night of bombing. The British Parliament was so concerned about her safety that they sent the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, to plead with her to leave the city, and she flatly refused. Pressed for a reason for her stubbornness, she waved her hand toward the London street on which she stood and stated defiantly, "These are not Mr. Hitler's streets." As the British Queen made her way through the streets each morning, she stopped to talk with Londoners as she cleared debris, extinguished fires, assisted the wounded, and recovered the dead. To each person, she said the same thing: keep calm and carry on. Her words became the rallying cry for the people of London. The people greeted each other with these words and were encouraged and amused by the Queen's positive attitude. The British Queen believed in a future that was better than the darkness of the moment. She pointed her people to something that was larger than themselves. Leaders assume responsibility for creating a better tomorrow. A positive attitude builds the speed of trust. Demonstrate humility. People are drawn to the confident but humble leader. They find it easy to trust humility and easy to trust the humbly confident leader. They trust the leader who, while confident, avoids arrogance. Arrogance is a trust buster. Perfection is not believable. No one knows everything. No one is 100% right 100% of the time. Even at their best, people remain imperfect. Trust thrives in a setting where the confident and competent leader is open to what they do not know. The value add of confident humility is the easy and comfortable sharing of credit. Humility enables the leader to quickly share credit and even more quickly to take the blame. Rosa Louise Macaulay Parks was the very picture of confident humility. You may know this Tuskegee, Alabama native as Rosa Parks. The U.S. Congress called her the First Lady of the Civil Rights Movement. On December 1st, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, Parks refused to obey the bus driver, Jane Blake's, order. Blake ordered her to give up her seat in the colored section to a white passenger because the white section was full. She held her head high as she was arrested and jailed for violating the segregationist Jim Crow law. What followed came to be known as the Montgomery bus boycott. The boycott lasted 385 days. The tension became so great that the home of Dr. Martin Luther King, a local pastor at the time, was bombed. The boycott ended when a U.S. District Court ruled that racial discrimination on public transportation was illegal. Throughout the boycott and in the years that followed, Rosa Parks remained confident and humble. She inspired many with the strength of her conviction that equal means equal. She won even more supporters with her humility. She never claimed to know what she did not know. She was comfortable relying on the expertise of others, and she was quick to share the credit for the boycott's success. She became one of the most trusted leaders of the 1950s and 60s. By now, you have probably realized that the speed of trust is not as mysterious as it may sound. In fact, It is practical. It is common sense. When we think about who and what we trust, the 6 strategies explain why. We are encouraged by those who take full responsibility for themselves. Taken together, clarity, compassion, competence, optimism, and humility explain pride of association and pride of workmanship, the predictable products of the speed of trust. A real-world example of how the speed of trust drives pride of association and workmanship is Ralph's Coffee and Donut Cart. Ralph's Cart is like hundreds of other food service carts in New York City, yet, in at least one way, it is unlike all the other food carts in New York City. It is true that his menu is, as Ralph would say, light and tight. He sells coffee, no decaf, and donuts, no muffins, no bear claws, no honey buns. But this is not what makes Ralph's unlike all the other carts. Because at Ralph's, the customers step up to the window, place an order for coffee and donuts, and then they make their own change. That's not a misprint. While Ralph fills their cups and bags their donuts, the customers make their own change. After ordering, they simply step to the side, dig into the cash box, and make their own change. Ralph trusts his customers. As a result, Ralph sells almost 3 times the coffee and donuts as his competitors. He does lose about 1 to 1.5% of his revenue in a given week, but guess what? So do his competitors. That is the typical loss for a food cart, even when the owner makes change. When you consider Ralph's unusual business practice, you discover a nearly perfect example of the speed of trust. Ralph's customers provide important insight into the success of Ralph's cart. They are proud to be associated with Ralph. In their opinion, only the best, most trustworthy people do business with Ralph. They love that Ralph trusts them, and the customers are quick to return the compliment. I once observed a man place an order, receive his order, and then attempt to walk away. 4 of Ralph's customers blocked the man. They did not get physical with him. They simply stood in his exit path and pointed to the cash box. And as if reciting a chant they had practiced, they said, "You need to pay before you leave." Customers also like the efficiency of the operation. They get their coffee and donuts 5 to 6 times faster than at other carts. Ralph's pride of workmanship is valued by his customers. Ralph does what only he can do in the cart's operation, which is pour coffee and bag donuts. His customers do what they can do, make change, and hold each other accountable. After all, Ralph's customers can count money. On Wall Street, money is their business. Best of all, Ralph's system confirms their highest opinion of themselves. Good people doing business with good people. This concludes the chapter of The Speed of Trust in the book, The Leader's Code, Principles and Strategies for Leadership by Ken Chapman. All rights reserved. Read by me, Derek Brown, for Brain Chatter Podcast. The Leader's Code book is about the principles which have guided the best leaders across the years. The best leaders have always led by example. Having mastered self-leadership, they then turn their attention to those who would follow. Their ultimate goal is to lead others to lead themselves. Supermarket bag boy, frontline supervisor, corporate vice president, university professor, and founder of the consulting firm Ken Chapman and Associates Incorporated, these are the kinds of experiences which Ken Chapman brings to the book, The Leader's Code. Drawing on his diverse experience, Ken provides a practical guide to principle-centered leadership. Ken has provided leadership and business ethics development for over 500 organizations on 4 continents. Ken is also the co-author of Safety Beyond the Numbers and the author of Personality, Making the Most of It, and Spark, Ignite the Leader in You. The book, published by Kingsgate Press, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, copyright 2023, Ken Chapman. Available where books are sold, online and otherwise. Thank you for your valuable time in listening to this podcast episode. For more information, visit leaderscode.com or follow Ken Chapman and Associates on LinkedIn. Thank you for listening.